And we're live on Truth Talk Radio. Yes, we're here. I had a show on Blog Talk Radio today, and it talked about a term I want you to get to be a little bit more familiar with. Net neutrality. Had a gentleman on there. As a matter of fact, I uploaded the episode earlier, and you can hear it on one of the archives on the show, Truth Talk Radio, featured on Spreaker. So really highly recommend listening to it. I learned so much, and I like to think that I'm pretty well versed in many different areas, but I still have a lot to learn. I think we all do, don't we? So, I want to talk about a couple different topics. I want to talk about Verizon, net neutrality, or as I like to term it, internet equality. That's really what it should be called. Oh, okay. I just got a message from somebody that they're on TalkShoe. Okay. I better tell him I am on Spreaker, shall we? Let's do this together. Let's type away. I am on Spreaker. Give me 15. We'll just do a 15-minute show, shall we? All right. So. Oh, hell, I said it. I probably shouldn't have said that. Jesus Christ. Yes. I am alive. I uploaded a former. All right. So I just want to get over a few things. Oh, where's my... Okay, there's my board. So, again, I wanted to talk about net neutrality, Verizon. I wanted to talk a little bit about the knockout game. There are some impending bills being passed through Illinois and Oklahoma, my state, to make it a felony to do the knockout game. Knockout game has been around for, I guess about 20 years, maybe 30 at the most. In past years, in 2012, as a matter of fact, 60% of the victims of the knockout game, and I'll explain that in a minute, were Jewish, in particular Jewish women. The knockout game is if you're on a street and with street traffic walking to and fro, or maybe you're walking to a building, you're in a parking lot, a group of usually young people, maybe not the smartest young people, but some young people, will walk up to you and without warning, punch you in the face and knock you out. At that point, and they're supposed to do it with one hit. You're supposed to knock them out with one hit, like that. And at that point, they yell out, knockout. Now, the trend lately, the last 2-3 years, has been to film these so-called knockout games and to put them on YouTube. In Illinois, and not as much in Oklahoma, but very close to it, Illinois is going to make it a felony to not help the victim and to record it, to put it up on social media. And I think this is an excellent idea. Now, unless you're filming it for evidence, like if you happen to be filming something and you catch it, because it happens very quickly. That's... I don't think it's right. I don't think it's right to film something like that, to film violence, unless it's used as evidence or a way to persuade people not to do said action. It should not be encouraged. That's what I think. Which brings up another point, racial violence. It seems to take another turn after the victims were Jewish women. And that's been historically the case, especially in New York, in a certain borough, Brooklyn, where there is a higher population and they're more out and about and on the street and walking. So, like for instance, the day after Christmas, what was his name? I'll give that to you another time, but a gentleman was, gosh, I shouldn't call him a gentleman, should I? A man was arrested that was 37 years old. He was African American, and he punched out 7 women. One was walking her very young, I think 6-year-old child, and he knocked her out right in front of her child. Another woman was pushing a stroller. She was an elderly woman. They knocked her out. Usually the hits came from behind the head. They didn't even see the man coming. So why the sudden surge of racial violence in the last couple of years? And why does it seem like it's coming from the African American culture? I believe it's because we've lived in a global state of fear, not just national, but global. That's why you saw the Arab Spring. And gosh, I could just keep talking about this forever and ever. But the fact is, we have the sudden surge of global fear, racial violence. And it's not, global means it's the entire world. It's not just America. It's Europe. And there's a gentleman, an author. His name is Colin Flattery. He wrote a book called White Girl Bleed a Lot. Now, this was taken from a video that he watched, one of these knockout games, one of these racial violence episodes where it's black on white crime. And a black teenager, very smart-mouthed, pointed to the young girl who was bleeding. And she said, "White girl, bleed a lot." That is where the title of his book comes from, just in case you're curious. But let's go back to what his book is about. And I should have him on my show in a few weeks. I'm very excited to have Colin Flattery on my show. What his show is about is the censorship of the media on racial violence, the sudden hush-up. Can't talk about that. Oh, that wouldn't be good. And if you can think of racial violence as this is a wonderful example. Think of racial violence as a car wreck. It's in that intersection that's not too far from you. I mean, it's steaming. There's oil on the ground. People are hurt. The sides of the car are smushed in. One of the doors is broken open. The back of the vehicle is in a V formation. There's a lot of angles to this car now because it's been hit really hard. Now, the media is there, and the media is filming, but they're trying to tell you that this car wreck, which represents racial violence, is not there. They're trying to convince you that it's not there. But you see it steaming, and you see that traffic's backed up. It's causing some issues. As a matter of fact, one of the streets, you can't even use it anymore. It's shut down. But the media is there. And the media is smiling and saying, "No, there's not a problem. The car wreck that you think you see over there does not exist." Now, I want you to think back in the 60s when the lynchings, or 50s, 40s, but in the 60s, people started talking about the lynchings that took place in South United States, in the southern states. Now, oftentimes, the media back then would tell you that the car wreck, the lynchings, did not exist. Think about it. Who's winning here? Who's winning? Where do we go from here? How do we stop the sudden surge of black on white racial violence? How do we do that? What are our options? And it is worth discussing. Also worth discussing is this net neutrality. On January 14th, the Federal Appeals Court sided on the side of Verizon. Verizon was suing the FCC, saying they should be able to basically eliminate net neutrality in favor of capitalism. But I want you to remember and note that no longer will you have torrents. You will not be able to use YouTube as you once knew it. The internet's going to be a lot more different. We will be cut off from the world, and that is a fact. Already a lot of the companies that are coming from different countries, that are the internet providers, apps, things of that nature, they are not linking to America. Instead, they're going to Canada. Instead, they're going to Mexico. We're going to lose jobs over this. This is not going to help us. It will help a few companies to create a monopoly like Facebook. It's very important to talk about this. I'm just one person on here. I hope some other people start discussing net neutrality. And I think we really need to call it internet equality, because it's not going to exist. You're basically, if you listen to my last podcast, what you're going to have is a segregated internet. And it's a little bit complicated, but if you can think of the internet as highways, and I think we can agree on that, they're going to start putting toll places where you have to pay a toll. Like before, you could just cruise right on through. No, they're going to put a stop point for you. And you're going to have to dole out some money, a lot of money, again and again and again. And the problem with this is, like, if you're hosting a show on Spreaker, you would have to pay more money just to use the site. And then your listeners are going to have to pay more money just to use Spreaker. This is going to how it's going to break down. And there will be monopolies, especially Verizon. They're going to form their own country, in a manner of speaking. If you remember AOL, places like that, completely closed online economies, AOL and Prodigy, they failed, and they failed for a reason. I don't know if you're old enough to remember those things, but, you know, if you look at the compare the growing internet of the mid-1990s, they weren't good at providing all the rich services of an open economy. And maybe I need to get an economist to explain all this a little bit better, but I think I got the gist of it. I may not understand every nuance, but I got the gist of it. I get it. And I hope you do too. You really need to start contacting your congressmen, your senators, and find, senators, representatives, and find out where they stand on this topic of net neutrality. Oh, I see someone's in the chat room. Okay. I would like to see what people think of net neutrality. I really would. But I'm going to keep this to about 15 minutes. I want this to be informative, and I want you to think and not sit on the sidelines and do nothing. Let's start a conversation. I need other people to talk about net neutrality, because it's going to matter. I mean, it's the timer is on, and your freedom's going to go away. At this point, it looks at 2015, maybe late 2014. You're going to start noticing a lot of servers going slower. They'll be able to adjust the bandwidth. It all comes down to the bandwidth. Time Warner, in particular, supplies the bandwidth to 100 million Americans. That's a big number. And they have a big stake in this case. If you think of all the fraud with the pirated music and movies, this is one way for them to strike back. They can cut the bandwidth. You no longer will be able to watch Netflix or movies on YouTube. I know some of y'all do that. So, I see someone in the chat room. I really think you should look at this. It just happened. Let me write that down. Nutri. Gosh, I always forget how to spell it almost. Almost spelled nature. I don't know why I want to spell that name. Look up that name right there. I put it in the chat. Net neutrality. It's important. It's vital. It's hard to digest. Make sure that you have some time to process it when you learn about it. Because it made me feel so dirty to live in a country that would allow such a thing. Because in order to take over a government or a country, through the government, you need to cut off the communications. You have to limit the communications. We will be like some of the Middle Eastern countries. Excuse me. I'm kind of worked up about this, more so than I am about other things. But those Middle Eastern countries that are very limited on what they can do on the internet, that's coming to your computer. That is now. Forget the freedoms that you once knew. It's over. Unless you speak up, start a conversation, call that senator, call that representative, and please do call them. I think that works a lot better than emailing them. They have to, in their office, they have someone that logs the calls and why they called, the position that they want. They type it in, and it matters. And unless you're your representative